The next thing I want to talk about are some demographic changes focusing on aging. When we look at this, as of 2018, the most recent information available is it shows the median age of the people in the country and the percent of the population 65 years or older. As we can see, Germany, 47 is the median age, and 28%, almost a third of the population, is over 35. We look at Europe, it's 20. We look at the US, again, 38, 16. We now look at some of the frontier markets, emerging markets, and we see that others have much younger and less population. This has long-term effect not only in our country, but in other developed countries. And it's interesting to note that China median age is 37, also the world being at 30. But this becomes, when you start looking at aging and what happens from an economic and a business perspective, it does change things. So that's where we are today. If we look forward, and this is here from the U.S. Census Bureau, is you see the increase in the raw numbers of people 65 to 84, but also in this 85 plus. So if we look at where we are now, that is going to significantly increase. And if we look at that 21% by 2030, that's not that far off. 58% and less younger children. And that, when you have less children under the age of 18, that's what's impacting colleges today. And we have seen that in GENESEo as the number of student enrollments have declined, the number of apps have declined. So we're seeing this trend, if you will, for aging. Now, that has implications on our economy. You have higher medical costs. People are staying in workforces longer, second, third, fourth careers. A lot of part-time workers. And they're not working, some are working because they have to work. Others is they need, it gives them purpose, and they like what they're doing. They're healthy. There's no reason for them to retire. That has different impacts. Different lifestyle and buying habits as people age. And I think you start looking at this from a company's perspective, what the product is, how do you deliver it? Now we look at it from an organizational behavior perspective. Well, how do you train new workers? How I train an 18-year-old may be different than I train a 65-year-old. So I think we're seeing this as a big trend. And this isn't going to go away unless people in your age group start having kids in the next year or two, and then have 4 or 5 kids. When we look at this chart, this is another scary chart here, and when we see Americans age 20 to 64 declining, and we see those 65 and older increasing, we can see some connections back to when recessions had happened and how it's going to move. But again, this is a big piece of America in millions of people. Take this one very odd thing is that U.S. home sales by decade, and you can see the number of new homes built. But now what you're seeing is as seniors age out and move out of homes into apartments with family communities, a lot of homes are going to come on the market. So this is going to totally change the dynamic of housing, where housing will be, especially in major cities like New York. The other thing that is changing, and this is in the U.S., is the mix of our ethnicity. And as you can see here, the white, non-Hispanic is declining between now and 2050 to 46, significant increase in Hispanic, and the others remain about the same. So again, there's this changing mix, older, more diverse. Over the summer, we had the Black Lives Matter, and that's moving. That is not a trend that's going to go away. Again, this issue of systemic racism. I mean, when we're looking at it, it's a real situation, and businesses are addressing this both from a product development, a financing, HR opportunities for people within the firm. And I think I look at this, there's really becoming anti-racist, and you're going to hear a lot about this over the next year or two, especially here at the college, is fear, learning, growth. Okay? And this first one is I deny it even exists. I don't ask hard questions. I strive to be comfortable. I talked with others who look like me. Okay, moving on to learning, I recognize it's a problem. I seek out questions that make me uncomfortable. I understand my own privilege in ignoring racism. I educate myself. I am vulnerable about my own biases. For those of you in organizational behavior, we're going to look at implicit bias. I listen to others. Then there's the growth zone. Okay, identify how I may be doing things. How do I educate people? I don't let mistakes deter me from being better. So I think we're in this process, and it's important for the continued growth of our world, but our growth of our economy and the growth of business. And how a company embraces this or doesn't embrace it will determine their future. So that when we're looking at this from a financial statement analysis perspective, this does have meaning. So those are some of our demographic changes. The next thing that we have is climate. And a lot about this, but I'm just going to present a few pieces here, and we'll be looking at this in more depth. There is more information available in Canvas. And it's growing. Okay, we have clearly seen an increase in global temperatures, but what this results in is heat waves, floods, drought. It's non-linear. Okay, it's expected that the temperature to increase between 1.5 and 5 degrees Celsius relative to today in many locations. And what we can see is that the warming is happening in the most poorest and vulnerable populations. But go back and look at how many people live in these areas here. This is a lot of people. But the long-term effects are huge. So the thing is this, with this global warming, and let's just give you what this greenhouse effect is that the sun's rays, right here, pass through the atmosphere, and some are reflected into space, allowing the Earth to cool. But some are trapped by carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That causes, this increased carbon dioxide causes more heat to be retained and temperatures to increase. So that's what we're looking at there on a very simple English basis. Now, when we look at some of this, and this is as of, it was released on Thursday, where do we have droughts? Okay, and think about this, if you have droughts and you're trying to grow crops, droughts impact that food supply. And when we look at exceptional drought, we look at a good piece of our country is experiencing exceptional extreme. Okay, and when we look here in New York, part of it is abnormally dry, but we still have moderate droughts throughout New York State. So this drought is a result, again, if you think of this as a change, what the impact of that is going to be. I want to take a minute and just talk about how a changing climate can impact different systems. Okay, and if we look at the world is made up of a number of systems, it can help us understand. The first one, livability and work. Okay, and this example here, and this is the 5 systems: livability and work, food systems, physical assets, infrastructure, natural capital. So India, likelihood of experiencing a lethal heat wave in climate-exposed regions. Look at the percent of that growing over a period of time. Now, only 10% of Indian households owned an air conditioning unit. Look at the number of people who living in these areas. That's the size of the entire United States. food systems, global bread baskets, okay? And again, we see that 60% of global food production occurs in only 5 regions, okay? If the harvest, the likelihood of it happening at least once per decade, look at these numbers. 10, this is big. So what we have is the impact on food system. What we eat, where we grow it, how do we get it to the consumer? We look at physical assets, sea level rising, okay? The number of residential units above high tide, huge. 100-year storms, we've had them. Infrastructure services, flooded areas in Vietnam, okay? Number of people going to be impacted, 10 to 13 million. 10% of India to be negatively impacted by heat. 60% of our food production impacted. Florida flooding, 200 billion. 10 to 13 million in one city alone with the floods that impact the infrastructure. Glaciers, the rising. I can tell you I've personally been on glaciers in Iceland, and I can tell you they're melting. Okay? And if you think about it, what that means is, one, a lot of people do get water from glaciers, but more importantly, as glaciers melt, okay, that's fresh water, and if you're looking at it off Iceland, what's happening is these glaciers melt, that's cold fresh water with mixing with warm salt water as the Atlantic current moves up. Now, when you put them two together, what happens is you have a reversal in the trend, so that instead of it moving up, it's going to move down, again, bringing flooding. So these are some of the systems that are impacted by that. So when we look at this, we have the cost of adapting coastal levels to rising sea levels, relocation of whole towns, shrinking productivity of harvest. Prices of basic foodstuffs and consumer goods will rise. Who will be most adversely impacted? Extreme meteorological phenomenon. Disease will spread due to higher temperatures. Fresh water, we take that for granted. More wars to gain access to limited resources. Loss of the capacity to work. So there's a huge impact, and companies today need to pay attention to that. Whether you like it or not, it's real. There's some additional resources that I've put there on. The next trend that we're seeing is disruption, whether that be innovation, artificial intelligence, digital transformation, rethinking, reimagining. And this is something that has been underway, and I believe, in my opinion, that COVID-19 is really accelerating these. Disruptors literally uproot and change how we think. How do we behave, do business, learn, and go about day-to-day lives? A disruption displaces an existing market, industry, technology, and produces something new and more efficient and worthwhile. It is at once both destructive and creative. I think if we go back and look historically, the smartphone and Amazon are the best examples. You can dig down here to find the article on that. In each year, CNBC identifies companies that are disruptors. So if you click here, you'll be able to see what some of these disrupting companies are. What are they doing to change? It's a technology evolution, global transportation, changing use of energy. So we have these disruptors. And I think when we look at what's happened with COVID-19, it's forcing reinvention of almost everything that we know. This is new opportunities for you and I. It's new opportunities for business to build their strategy, to continue to be sustainable on a long-term basis. Part of this is innovation. And I think when we look at this from what are the essentials of innovation? And we can look at this both from a finance perspective and an organizational behavior perspective. Aspire. Is innovation-led growth critical? Does it work through the organization? Do you make decisions, time and risk balance decisions? Do you have differentiated businesses, market and technology that converts into winning value propositions? That's the discovery. And in finance, we want to know what the companies are doing. But when we look at it from a leadership perspective, the leader needs to facilitate this, live this, and make that. Are you evolving? Do you create new business models? Accelerate. Can you move quickly? I think we're going to see in some of the follow-up things that we have that speed becomes important. And again, we saw this with the whole COVID-19, from how companies reacted to the development of a vaccine. Is it the right scale? Do you win by building on networks? Are your people motivated, rewarded, and organized to innovate repeatedly? So if we want to be innovative, and companies, if you go back and look at some of these disruptors over time, these are the things they do. We start to look at artificial intelligence, okay? And this becomes important to see, but there's gaps starting to develop. High-performing companies are doing much better in investment, in leveraging AI, okay? Again, 22% attribute at least 5% of their EBITDA to AI. People are using them, but we're seeing this difference between high performers and others. And you can go through this, but AI in every category, the leverage of artificial intelligence is in high performing companies. Is walk you through a presentation on 5G. This was actually done by Dan Borg and Jake Puccio. And take a look and catch you on part 3. Is in Finance 315, each of the students work together in a team with someone else to share what's going on in the world based on Wall Street Journal articles. How do we tie in this innovation? And Dan Borg and Jake Puccio did something called 5G. So I just want to walk it through because we don't all know. Some of you may have seen this presentation. But 5G stands for Fifth Generation Cellular Wireless. The standards for this were set at the end of 2017. Verizon and AT&T both launched preliminary 5G services in late 2018. It's not broadly available right now. There's still a lot of uncertainty about it. So to start out, what is 5G? Fifth generation 5G facts. It's 1,000 times more capacity than 4G, 100 times faster than 4G. By 2021, infrastructure will be in place to reach about 100 million Americans out of 300. At the same time, the Chinese will have the entire country covered by that point. There's almost 58,000 patents filed in 2018 around 5G. So what we can see here is it has a lot of different things that go into it. Some of it will affect broadband, our mobility. It's high data rate, high capacity, reliability, security, low latency, long battery life, massive number of devices. So with this 5G, it's not as much what it's going to do for our cell phone, because 1G it's not so much what's going to hit our smartphones. Take a look for factories. The response time for more efficient work on the latency. Combination of wireless charging and connectivity will allow mobile robots to remain on the job at all times. It'll increase the output of factories while lowering variable costs. Increase productivity. For doctors in medicine, it connects patients at home with doctors to streamline service, improve care for patients that are hard to move. Allow doctors to perform surgery from around the world on patients using surgery machines. So a surgeon in Rochester could operate in someone in South Africa. It's going to allow EMTs and paramedics to connect hospitals to start treatment faster and to provide with the guidance they need. The speed and capacity. For cars, this is going to be a huge deal. It's more reliable. And essentially, think about this. It's going to provide a more complete experience, but driverless cars are the big thing with this. And with this additional speed and capacity, it will be able to get more information about traffic hazards faster. So if you're driving one of these you're not driving, you're sitting in a self-driving car, it is going to be able to respond to an obstacle or a situation much, much faster than 4G, thus making it more profitable. When we keep going, it's going to be used in sports. We've already seen some of that. South Korea at the Winter Olympics. It's a host of cameras and sensors throughout the venue. So you can literally run with the sports person. They experimented in the 2019 All-Star game. You can get statistics on your phone. So there's a lot of use for it. This will disrupt process. For, say, surveillance. Surveillance cameras on city streets are going to be able to automatically identify criminals with facial recognition. That's a little bit scary. They can track individual behavior, personalized coupons, and stores can be set up anywhere without cashiers like the Amazon Go method, just grab and go. So that is a big piece of that. And let's just take a brief look at this Amazon Go.